So, today I want to share something a little personal. I have been in relationships with both avoidant and anxious partners. And what fascinates me is how differently those relationships impacted me, right? Each one highlighted something different, different wounds, different strengths, and different areas where I still had room to grow. And looking back, I can honestly say that neither relationship type was inherently better or worse, right? They simply just taught me different lessons about myself, about relationships, about what secure attachment actually looks like. And I think a lot of us fall into the trap of labeling certain attachment styles as good or bad, or believing that one type of relationship ruined us while another saved us. But when I look back, I realize that each relationship served as a mirror, reflecting different parts of myself that needed attention and healing and growth. Right? My avoidant relationships reinforced my hyper independence because emotional support, wasn't always readily available. I learned how to rely on myself. I learned how to self soothe, keep myself very busy, become resourceful, and not expect much from others. In fact, one partner needed so much space for his hobbies and his interests that instead of focusing on, when I'd see him next or, when he would give me attention, I started developing my own hobbies. I learned photography, which I picked up from him. I started making jewelry and eventually sold it. I imported bikinis from Brazil and sold those too. So, to be honest, that's where a lot of my entrepreneurial spirit came from and why I'm here today doing what I'm doing. Another relationship involved a partner who traveled constantly for work, also avoidant, which meant I spent a lot of time alone, right? Long drives from Colorado, where we were living, to California, where I'm originally from, to be with family. And I did those drives, I think it was like 14-hour drives all by myself, which I actually learned to really, really love. It was also a lot of weekends by myself, holidays by myself, just figuring out how to enjoy my own company. And while those experiences weren't always easy, they taught me something very valuable, which was how to be alone without feeling lonely and how to create a fulfilling life outside of a relationship. Many of the passions and hobbies and businesses and self reliance I have today were born from those experiences. Now, some of those lessons were obviously, very valuable. Independence is important. Learning how to stand on your own 2 feet is important. But hyper independence can also become a trauma response. It can convince us that needing others is weak, that asking for support is a burden, that the safest option is to handle everything ourselves. And I remember one very distinct moment when I had severe lower back pain from a herniated disc, and I was literally crawling on the floor just to get from one side of the house to the other side of the house. And I called my partner who was on a work trip, begging him to come home. Now, this isn't about blaming him for choosing work or suggesting he was a bad partner, but experiences like that can often leave a lasting imprint on us. All right. When we repeatedly find ourselves in moments of need and don't experience the support or the comfort or the care that we're hoping for, we can begin to adapt. We tell ourselves things like, I can't rely on anyone. I have to handle everything myself, or my needs are too much. And you can see that that speaks to the avoidant attachment wound. And over time, those beliefs can evolve into hyperindependence, right? Which is a trauma response where relying on yourself feels safer than risking disappointment from others. And the problem is that while this strategy may protect us from being let down, it can also make it difficult to ask for help, to receive support, to receive love, or allow others to show up for us when we need them. Now, on the other hand, my relationships with anxious partners brought out some very different lessons. As you may imagine, there were also a lot of challenges that came with dating highly anxious partners, especially after developing an appreciation for space and autonomy and independence. Anxious partners often desire a great deal of connection and reassurance and communication. And while there's absolutely nothing wrong with those needs, and I find them to be truly, truly beautiful, given there's a balance with them, those relationships challenged me to examine where I was over accommodating, over explaining, taking responsibility for their emotional state. And I found myself asking, am I reaching out because I genuinely want to connect? Or am I trying to prevent conflict, right? Am I helping or am I over functioning? Am I being compassionate or am I abandoning myself? Am I communicating because I want to or because I'm afraid of disappointing them? And many times I felt drained, criticized, controlled, consumed, burnt out, and as though I was kind of walking on eggshells. And while those experiences were difficult, they taught me something incredibly important about boundaries. I realized that supporting someone is very different from becoming responsible for them. And that's a distinction many of us struggle with in relationships, right? Those relationships forced me to strengthen my boundaries and develop a stronger sense of self. I even have one distinct memory where, I wanted to go on a hike by myself and my anxious attached partner was questioning me about, why I didn't want him to come with me, why I wanted to go alone. Was I upset? Was I losing interest in them? Was I hiding something from them? And I found myself repeatedly having to reassure them that I wasn't cheating, that I wasn't getting tired of them, that I just wanted time alone, right? And that didn't mean that I loved them any less. And honestly, that level of distrust and reassurance seeking can become incredibly consuming. Right? It can also be really disheartening when someone consistently assumes the worst about you, not because of anything you've done, but because they're struggling to manage their own fears and their own anxieties and insecurities. And in those relationships, I found myself shutting down more, right? Becoming more avoidant, pulling away, not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't standing my ground or asserting my boundaries. And instead, I was constantly trying to manage their emotions to prevent conflict and to essentially just keep them happy. And over time, that became exhausting. It ultimately contributed to me ending the relationship because the dynamic just felt unsustainable. And here's what's fascinating with all of this, that neither experience was inherently good or bad. Each relationship simply illuminated something different areas where I still had room to grow. One taught me independence, the other taught me boundaries. One taught me self-reliance, the other taught me where I was susceptible to codependent tendencies. Ultimately, both experiences pointed me toward the same lesson. The goal isn't hyper-independence, and it's not over-dependence either, right? The goal is interdependence. And interdependence is the ability to stand on your own 2 feet while also allowing yourself to lean on and trust another person. It is knowing how to take responsibility for yourself without carrying responsibility for everyone else, right? It's being able to support your partner without losing yourself in the process. That one was huge for me. And it's also about being able to receive support, right? Without feeling weak or incapable. It's having your own life, right? Your own identity, your own emotional regulation skills while still allowing space for connection and intimacy and partnership. And honestly, I think that's where many of us get stuck, right? We swing from one extreme to another. Maybe we become hyper independent after being hurt, or maybe we become overly dependent because we're afraid of losing connection. But secure attachment lives somewhere in the middle, right? It's flexible, it's balanced, and it's connected. And like I said before, the relationships that challenge us the most reveal the exact areas where we still have room to grow. And if you're currently in one of these dynamics, I want to offer you a different perspective. Rather than viewing your relationship solely as a problem to solve, what if you viewed it as an opportunity to learn something about yourself? Maybe your avoidant partner is highlighting where you need to develop greater self-trust, independence, and emotional regulation. Maybe your anxious partner is revealing where you need stronger boundaries, clear communication, or a firmer sense of self. Maybe the relationship is challenging beliefs you've carried for years about love and trust and vulnerability, conflict, or intimacy. Now, this doesn't mean that every relationship should be saved, and it certainly doesn't mean tolerating unhealthy behavior. But every relationship gives us information, right? Information about where we need to take responsibility, information about where we need to communicate differently, information about where we need to establish boundaries, and information about where we still have healing to do. Secure relationships aren't built by perfect people. They're built by two people who are willing to look inward, take ownership of their patterns, communicate openly, and make the effort to grow together, right? And sometimes the relationship itself becomes the classroom where these lessons are learned. So rather than asking, was this relationship good or bad? A more helpful question might be, what did this relationship teach me about myself, right? Because every relationship leaves us with information, with feedback, right? Information about our fears, our needs, our boundaries, our blind spots, our strengths. And if we're willing to reflect, every relationship can bring us one step closer to becoming our most secure self, as I like to call it. And if you're just beginning your attachment healing journey and looking for practical tools to help you create healthier patterns in your love life, I've created the Secure Self Toolkit. And inside, you'll find attachment rewiring meditations, communication scripts, a trigger guide, a secure self roadmap, and a 30-day secure self plan designed to help you move beyond awareness and start implementing change today. If you need more personalized support, you can book a free clarity call with me to learn about one-on-one coaching. Both links are in the caption. Until next time, and remember to ask yourself, what would secure me do?